Hey, thank you, Martha, and welcome to Listen and Be Heard Radio on WPVM 103.7 FM, the voice of Asheville. Very excited today about today's guest, another author with a wonderful new book that's just come out. Beverly Parayno is author of the new short story collection, Wildflowers. Now, Beverly was born in East San Jose, California, by immigrant parents from the Philippines. Her fiction, memoir, and essays and author interviews have been in Narrative Magazine, Bellingham Review, The Rumpus, Warscapes, and Southward, New Writing from Ireland. Her work has been translated into Mandarin and published by World Literature, a journal of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And, in reading her biography, it's fascinating. There's one other fascinating thing about Beverly is that she is an animal communicator, and we will talk to her a little bit about that. She lives in Cameron Park, California, which is close to Sacramento. Beverly, welcome to Listen and Be Heard.
Thank you, Tony.
Congratulations on your book. I want to start off with place. Place and setting is so important to writers and how they craft their stories. Now you're from San Jose, East San Jose, California. Can you talk about East San Jose and how it shaped you as a writer and an artist?
So yeah, my parents are immigrants from the Philippines, and my dad was able to come over through joining the U.S. Navy in Manila. And so that's kind of how our family came over when he got stationed in Alameda. I was born in Alameda. And my parents wanted to, I guess, move to the suburbs and have more space for us to grow up. And we had known a few families from my dad's hometown, Urdaneta, Pangasinan, who were living in San Jose. So that's how we ended up in San Jose. And I have to say that I was so relieved when I got to my elementary school in San Jose because my experience in the early years, kindergarten, first grade, Alameda at the time was very, very white. My sisters and I were the only um, uh, people of color in the school besides one African American girl. And, we experienced racism and discrimination. I had a very racist teacher who actually questioned my broken English and used to pin a note on my shirt saying teacher daughter English. And I would walk home every day, sort of
Wow.
pushing the note out of my face, basically.
Mm.
So moving to San Jose was, I just couldn't believe how many people of color I saw when I walked into my new room at my new school. There were Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, there were Mexicans. It just was completely diverse. So I'm really grateful for growing up and moving to San Jose and growing up around so many different races and ethnicities. Yeah.
Oh yeah, go right. No, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, when we moved from one part of San Jose up to the foothills to another part of San Jose when I was in fifth or sixth grade, that neighborhood in the sort of Quimby area was heavily Filipino. I think it's like every other house in the tract housing was a Filipino family.
Wow. So it's like a night and day compared to Alameda. And your father was in the Navy, is that correct? Military, and that's how you were in
Yeah. Yes.
in Alameda.
He
Um,
joined in 1954 in Manila at the time when the Philippines was allowing Filipinos to enlist only in the Navy, not in the other armed forces.
okay. Your book, Wildflowers, in reading the short stories that are really lovely. It's a very vast landscape of many themes, and I was able to pick out a few. I mean, vulnerability, a sense of powerlessness, family, displacement, transformation, some superstition, the definition of home. Um, can you describe those themes and how they converge in your book to give us a sense of a particular world, your world?
Yeah, so I think that, well, the first thing I want to say is, as a writer, I don't really set out to write about themes. I set out to write about people and the characters and the story and the situations, and the themes emerge from the story. So it's sort of after I write a story that it's like, oh, this theme is emerging, or that, trauma is emerging, or intergenerational trauma or racism is emerging. So it's sort of an organic process as these
Mm.
themes emerge. But I think, a lot of my stories are autofiction. A lot of them are based on personal experiences, although they are fiction. So I do take a lot of liberties. So, for example, the first story, Savior, is set in San Jose, where I grew up. And there is, grandparents in the house who recently immigrated from the Philippines. There's a lot of tension in the home. There's, two parents just trying to sort of stay afloat financially. They're recent immigrants as well. And as a result of immigration and three generations in the house, financial insecurity, and just, the father's history of violence and domestic violence and corporal punishment growing up in the Philippines, both from family and as well as the education system. There's violence, in the house. So the narrator of that story is a young girl, 10 years old, who's sort of just trying to navigate this world, with a violent father and a submissive mother and grandparents who basically can't really help, in terms of stopping the abuse in the house.
Yeah, and a striking thing about that story is that you have these different, you have all these different relatives in the house, and there's there's this unspoken tension that kind of just flares, and people, kind of know when different buttons are being pushed, and it it kind of struck me as children, bearing the brunt of that. I mean,
Mm.
that children oftentimes take those early traumas, and those things follow through their lives, and oftentimes as writers we use those things, and hopefully through our stories it can help other folks that have perhaps gone through those similar type of situations. There was a story, talking about home, because you have immigrants and then you have first, second generations, and yet the immigrants are kind of caught between two worlds. You have a very powerful story in the book. It's called Balikbayan, and it really reminded me of a story that the writer, Filipino American writer Oscar Peñaranda wrote. It was called The Price, and
Mm.
your story Balikbayan, it's really about an ancestral home, and letting go of an ancestral home, selling it, going back to the Philippines and selling it. But to the main character, it was almost like selling a piece of their memory, of their history, of their soul. Can you tell our listeners, our WPVM listeners, who may not be familiar with the term Balikbayan, if you can
Hmm.
tell them what Balikbayan is, and
Hmm.
just maybe a little bit about that short story, because it was extremely very powerful.
Thank you. So Balikbayan is basically a Filipino in the diaspora coming home to the Philippines. And so, yeah, that story is I have to say that it's always challenging for me to set a story in the Philippines. I'm American born. I'm the first in my family to be born in America. I have only been to the Philippines twice, both times as an adult. And so I'm, I'm always a little bit challenged setting a story there and not entirely comfortable, but I do it anyway just to challenge myself. So I think about 4 of the 9 stories in my collection, Wildflowers, are set in the Philippines. And so this one in particular, I really wanted to have a protagonist who is very American, had never been to the Philippines. This particular protagonist was born there, but came to America very early, so has no memories of the Philippines and is just very, very American. And when she has to escort her father and her stepmother back because they're elderly and they need help and they want to sell land, knowing that they're aging and probably won't be able to go back to the Philippines again. She's very hesitant. She doesn't want to go. She doesn't like her dad. She doesn't like her stepmother. She only really knows about the Philippines through what you see on the news, poverty and violence and um, you know, Duterte and these
Kidnappings and things like that.
kidnappings
Yeah,
and assassinations and killings. And so she doesn't want to go. So it's, she has no choice. Her siblings can't go. So that's kind of the premise of the story is someone who's very reluctant going back to their home country.
yeah, and I think for a lot of Philams or Filipino Americans, if you will, we can relate to that because many of us have maybe only been to the Philippines once or twice, if at all. And once we get there, we start to see things in a different way. It's almost like it's a homecoming, but it's a spiritual homecoming and journey. And
Mm.
I think the story is Balikbayan is very telling, and I think it would resonate with a lot of uh, immigrant families.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Because I think anyone who has the interest and the ability to travel to their home country, if they're American and have never been, I mean, I know not everyone is able to, but if there's that interest is there and there's a way to do it, I think it could be very powerful, especially for, uh, first generation,
Mhm.
um, you know, of immigrant children. It's things just make sense. Things start to click into place. It's like, oh, this is why mom and dad do this. Everyone does it here. So just things for me started to really make sense, and I started also to see my parents as like full dimensional people, 3 dimensional people who
Yeah,
had
yeah.
a childhood and a adolescence and a young adult experience before they even came to the US. So yeah, I think it's an
You
important
see them.
trip to make.
I guess it allow you to see them in a different context outside of
Definitely.
outside of what
Yeah.
you were used to. The other thing about the stories and your background as well in reading your bio, your writing moves across geographies of emotion, of themes and time and place. You have a story that is set in Ireland, and I
Mm,
know from your biography that you studied in Cork, in
mm-hmm.
Ireland.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your? It's very interesting. Talk if you could talk about your experience as a Filipino American writer or student of writing, living and studying in Ireland. What was it that brought you there?
What was it that brought me there? I think as an undergrad, when I was doing a semester abroad in Bath, UK, I took a literature course and on the short story and read a Yeats short story, and it was in a short story collection on modern Irish stories.
Mm.
And there was some kind of some supernatural elements and some superstition in that story, and it just sort of piqued my interest about Ireland. And I actually wanted to go to Ireland while I was studying in Bath, but my host parents at the time were like, "Oh no, there's nothing in Ireland. Don't go to Ireland." And so they kind of talked me out of it. So I didn't end up going. And but I always had a pull for the place, and I don't know why, except around this supernatural connection, because I grew up in a very superstitious family.
Mm. Yeah.
Grew up in a
Yeah.
family of healers.
Yeah.
I myself am, an animal communicator. My mom was a healer. Is a healer. My grandfather was a town abulario. He was also the Ghostbuster. His grandfather was a healer. So I just have that along my maternal line. And, just grew up with so much superstition in the house that the minute I saw that in an Irish story, I just thought Philippines and Ireland have this connection through superstition.
That's beautiful because you don't really hear that. There's a powerful scene in Savior where the grandfather tries to lessen some of the pain that the
Yeah.
young girl is going through, and that was part of his I guess his calling as a healer. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, Now you had worked in tech for a while. I think you're kind of like a master of all trades. You worked in a Japanese restaurant. You worked in a Mexican restaurant. Cocktail waitress. You worked in publishing. You worked in a dental office. You worked in what else? A publisher's office. And no, there was one other place you worked at. Did I say dental office? You worked in dental office,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and then you worked in tech. Um, how do those working experiences, or have they influenced your life as a writer? Having all these different jobs, because it just seems like
Yeah.
you're in tech, and we think of all
Right.
this money, and we think about, and then you're not exactly thinking about creative writing when tech comes to mind.
Yeah, I love this question, because I actually just accidentally landed in tech, just being from San Jose and you're in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone just falls backward into tech because it's so prolific in the area and that's where all the jobs are. And so family got me into tech. And, so I was graduating San Jose State, and it was my last year as an English major, with absolutely no clue what I was going to do, but I
Mhm.
just know that I loved the major and would do it 1,000 times over again. I loved it so much. And I got an internship in a high tech company called 3Com in Santa Clara. And for me, I had gone, so picture this. So I was I was a very good student up until high school. And then I was just a complete like rebel. I failed my classes. I never went to school. I was cutting classes. I was partying. And then I dropped out my senior year. I ran away, um, to upstate New York with my boyfriend at the time. That's the subject of a memoir I'm working on. And so when I came back, I had I had to go to a junior college. I went to DeAnza College because there was no way I could get into a four-year university. So thank God for I am the biggest fan of junior colleges. I would never have gotten a second chance without JCs. And so I went to a junior college and ended up transferring to San Jose State as an English major. So the reason why I give that background is to say, by the time I started in high tech, I was meeting people and working with people that had a lifestyle and a background and a level of education that I'd never, I'd never met people like that. I'd never met people with master's degrees. I'd never met people who had traveled the whole world and lived around the world. So joining high tech for me was um, like just this wow, this other world of these people living kind of lavishly, and so educated and so well traveled and so interesting. So for me, it became this I need to climb. I had like this social mobility. I need to elevate my life. I want to be like them. I'm not like them. I'm, I don't have their experience or their education. And they just were so interesting to me, so fascinating. And so that's kind of what high tech was for me, was like trying to elevate my social class, my social standing, um, broadening myself. Um, yeah. And so I think you'll find in the book there are stories like dilation, stories like rescue, where the character, the protagonist, the female protagonist, they're all women in the book, is dating someone who she, whether or not it's true, she sees them as better, as having more. And even though the relationships aren't fulfilling for her or even healthy, she stays in them and she's trying because she wants to become part of that world.
I think that's a an underlying thread, a constant thread in these stories where you have somebody that doesn't quite feel that things are right and is confronted with it, and then comes out it comes out the other side with a different perspective. And for the reader, I think it really resonates, how, another theme, I guess, in these stories, common thread is transformation.
Mm,
Transformation from trauma, transformation from, just feeling like the odd person out, and growing from
yeah.
that. um, we are going to have to wrap up, but I don't want to wrap up before asking you about the animal communication. If you want to
Sure.
if you want to give a plug out for that, that's fine, go right ahead.
Yeah, so again, I come from a line of healers. I always felt that my intuition was fairly strong, and I've had sort of instances in my life where I did feel like some higher power was speaking to me. So in 2018, I took it upon myself to take my first animal communication class, and it turns out I'm very natural at it. And so basically, it's telepathic communication with animals, and it's not just dogs and cats. I've talked to horses and rabbits and birds. I also talk to nature, lakes, the ocean, trees, basically anything that is alive. And trust me, I understand it sounds completely crazy, but telepathic communication is real. We all have it. We just have learned not to cultivate it in our culture, but it's something that's innate. And again, like we all have it. Maybe some stronger than others.
And you've been able to help people. I mean, there are people that have had issues with their dogs and cats, or what have you,
Hmm.
and you've been able to communicate with them and help find a solution, or at least better a situation where an animal was unhappy, and you got a chance to figure out why. Um, Again, Beverly, thank you so much for being on our program, Listen and Be Heard Radio. Now, your book launch is happening on Saturday, May the 27th, in San Francisco. Is that correct? And the book is published by PAWA. PAWA stands for Filipino American Artists and Filipino American Writers and
Yeah,
Artists. And
right.
it's going to be at the Philippine Center. Is that correct?
Yeah, Pawa Press is actually, so Pawa is the organization. It's a literary organization and indie press promoting Filipinx writers. And we are the producer. I'm on the board of Pawa, and we produce the Filipino American International Book Festival, the largest book festival in the US dedicated to Filipinx writers. And Pawa Press is our imprint. And so I'm very proud to be a Pawa Press author. And yes, we are going to have a celebration on Saturday, May 27th, 2 o'clock come through. It's going to be at Centro Filipino, 814 Market Street. And there's going to be 6 readers, wonderful readers, sharing the mic with me, and lots of food and wine. And yeah, it's not going to be a stuffy event. It's going to be a celebration.
For sure, for sure. And for those folks that aren't able to fly to San Francisco from Asheville, can you tell them how to get your book?
Yes, please go to Wildflowers BP, as in Beverly Parayno, wildflowersbp.com. You can learn about the book and you can purchase a copy, and there's a free shipping and a signed copy through May. And yeah, I'm pleased to say that the book is doing very well during the pre-order period. So I'm super excited.
Fantastic. Again, Beverly Parayno, Beverly Parayno. It's spelled Parayno, author of the brand new book of short stories, Wildflowers, animal communicator extraordinaire. Thank you so much for being on our program today. And again, thank you so much for listening. We're going to toss it back to Martha in the studio. And thank you for listening to WPVM 103.7 FM.